Good morning. It is time for our block 5 of our Sixpenny Memories sew along, and what I want to do today is to concentrate on some half square triangles, and I'll show you the block as we go along. It really is going to be an exercise on measuring and trimming accurately, because I have had a number of requests from people who have been asking me how to do that, and I think that followed up from last week's block, or the block 4, which was this one here, and some people had a little bit of difficulty with this, so I thought we'll concentrate on simple half square triangles, and then you will be such an expert at them by the time you're finished, and confident. That's all we need. It's not being an expert, it's being confident about how to do them. So I'm just going to move this down now. So I'm just going to use this hand here, because then you don't have to have my hands involved. So what we've got here, this is the block we're going to achieve. But what we've got here are, for the 9-inch block, we have got 2 squares which have to be contrasting, which should mathematically, for the 9-inch block, be 3 7/8 of an inch. And mathematically for the 12-inch block should be 4 7/8 of an inch. But I really don't like dealing with 1/8 of an inch. And the reason is, I will show you them on the ruler here. So can you see these little marks here? So there is an 1/8, and there is a 1/4, and there is 3/8. And then you've got your 1/2 of an inch. Now to do 3 7/8, we need to come across here and watch this line here. And to be honest, it's just a little bit more difficult for people to see. So just, if you see something with 7/8 of an inch, just move it up to the next inch. For cutting, it just makes your life so much easier. So I've pre-cut these. So as I say, these measure at 4-inch squares. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put one fabric on top of the other one. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to use my Prim marking pencil, because it gives me that nice fine line. And I'm going to use my Omnigrid 6-inch by 1-inch ruler. And I'm literally going to draw a line down the centre from corner to corner. So just using that like that. Okay. And once I've done that, I am then going to sew 1/4 of an inch either side. Now, if you're not confident about sewing 1/4 of an inch, then there's absolutely no reason why you can't draw yourself a second line here and use that as a guide for your sewing line. There's no shame in that at all. And the reason I say that is because I use 1/4 of an inch foot without the guide. You don't want one with a guide going across your sewing machine, because otherwise it bends the guide. So I know with my needle set in the centre that this is going to be a perfect 1/4 of an inch. But remember that we've given ourselves a little bit of wriggle room here, because we have made the squares slightly larger than mathematically they should be. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you round to the sewing machine. Take you to there, just move you up a little bit. So, oops, can you see? Right, so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew, now the line, the edge of the foot, so this edge of the foot here, should I turn the light off? Would that be helpful to you? Let me go into here and I will turn the light off my machine, because sometimes I think the glare, I've just got to find it in here. The glare sometimes comes through, and you don't need to have a glare on your thing. We need to see what's going. It would be the last one. Yep. So I'm just going to turn that off. Right. So is that a little bit better for you? So as we move it in here, what I'm doing is I am going to sew 1/4 of an inch either side. Oops. Not used to not having my light on. This is what it is. So just to sew down, I'm using Aurifil thread, and when I get to the end, I'm not cutting the thread, I'm literally just turning it round, and I'm going to sew. Do you know what it is? I've sewn the wrong line there, just because I'm talking at the same time. Yeah, I've sewn on the line. If you do what I've just done, which is sew actually on the diagonal line, you fool, because I haven't got my light on, then just sew. So we're going to sew down the side. If you sew on that centre line by any chance, you're not going to sit and unpick it, because we're actually going to cut that line open. But when we get to the end, just turn it round and sew the other side of the 1/4 inch line. I've got a series of lines in there. What I've done, it's because I haven't got my light, and I'm going to put my light back on because I can't cope with it being off, I'll be honest with you. Yes, I've sewn an additional line there, never mind. Anyway, so what you're going to do now is I'm going to bring you back to here and just tip you down. So I'll just physically move this thing round and tip you down to here. You could either use your rotary cutter and cut on that line, or just use your scissors and just cut down the drawn line. Now, if you were doing a lot of these, it would be easier to use your rotary cutter because it's just quicker. And when you open that up, you get a half square triangle. Now, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to press your half square triangle. And the easiest way to do that, and remember, every one we do, you're going to yield two squares equals 2 half square triangles. So if you pop it down here like that, and I'm just using the prim iron. Now on the wool mat, remember, don't have your iron on too hot, just have it that bottom dot. And the first thing you're going to do is set the seam, and then you're going to flip it open and just give it a quick press, and the wool mat just makes an enormous difference. Just take that off there. Okay. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim it down. And I failed on a Facebook Live because I didn't have this tripod, but we're going to sort it out on this one here. So I'm using a rotating mat because the rotating mat means that I'm not going to be moving the fabric, except I probably haven't got enough room here, but never mind. I'll physically move it. So you're going to pop this onto here. Now, what I want to talk to you about is the square ruler. If you've got a square ruler, use it. If you haven't bought a square ruler before, buy a one that is a 12.5 inch size, because that's going to cover a multitude of sins. I've got a 6.5 inch one here. If you're doing the 9-inch block, you're going to trim these down to 3.5 inches, and the 3.5 inch mark is there. Can you see that corner? Can you see that there? And the 4.5 inch one, if you're doing the 12-inch block, is here. Okay, so that's what we're going to cut it to. Now this diagonal line here is really important because that is going to sit on the seam of this block. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop that onto the block there. So can you see? We'll pop that onto the block so that the diagonal line of the ruler is sitting on top of the seam. And what I'm able to do is check that there's my 3.5 inch, so I'm actually within the square there, so I can trim that down lovely, and the 3.5 inches there. And the only thing I'm going to trim up is this side here and along here. And I'm going to use my lovely Prim Kai rotary cutter. So just standing up for this, so I'm going to cut up there. And it's the only time that you'll cut across yourself is when you're cutting across there. So now can you see you've got a perfect angle there. Now what you're going to do is I advise you not to move your fabric. You're going to physically move your board around. So all we'll do is, because my rotating one isn't working, I haven't got the bottom on properly, is I'm going to pop that like that. So I've moved the whole board, and I now know that this bottom edge, this here, is perfect. So I can get that 3.5 inch mark that's on my ruler. It's where the 2 points meet, where the vertical line and the horizontal line meets. You've got this point here, which is the spot on 3.5 inches, which you remember I'm doing for the 9-inch block. And this time, the diagonal line is travelling still up on my seam, and I'm going to trim up this side and across there. And I'm just going to stand up again for this. I just personally prefer standing when I'm cutting, making sure that I put pressure in the centre of there. And I'm going to cut up that side, get all the way up. And if it moves, just put it back on, okay? And remember, it's check twice, cut once, and cut across there. So now again, I have got a perfect 3.5 inch square. So then you're going to do that on all 4 squares. So here's ones I've prepared earlier. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay the block out. So we have got 1, and we have got 2, and we have got 3, and we have got 4 somewhere. We've got 1 for the centre. And then I've got some squares for the middle. So these here. So we've got a centre square for the 9-inch block. That is 3.5 inches. These blocks here, you need 4 3.5 inch squares for the fill-in block, shall we call them. And then you need a dark one or a contrast one, or you could have the same. It's entirely up to you. Again, a 3.5 inch square. And all I'm doing is, can you see, I've positioned it here. So this is the block. So you've got 1 half square triangle, a filler block, another half square triangle. This centre row here are just 3.5 inch squares. You've got 2 of the light ones and 1 of the dark ones. And then in the top row again, you've got your half square triangle, your filler block and a half square triangle. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew them together. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to flip that on top of there. And I have real difficulty remembering my rotation, so I'm going to put a pin in that side. It doesn't matter about the squares, but there's no harm in sticking a pin into there. And then I'm going to flip this one onto here. And again, because I'm guilty of turning them around in the sewing machine, I'm going to sew. And the reason I've put the pins in here is I know that this is the side that I'm going to sew on, and I can get them accurate in a second. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll pop these to one side. I'll bring the sewing machine back. I'm going to turn you around so you can see the sewing machine again. All right, and we're going to sew, and we're just going to chain piece. Now I know that this is the side, and you're just going to make sure that your squares all marry up together. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. So this time the edge of my foot is coming down here. And when I say chain piece, I literally mean we're going to feed one in like that. Then I'm going to pick the next ones up. And we're going to feed the next one in, which is the 2 squares. If you notice, I'm keeping them in rows. And this is because I so often get them the wrong way around. And then the third one, I'm just going to, it's a half square triangle and a square. I'm going to sew down. There's nothing worse than turning them round at the last minute, and then you have to unpick because you've got them in the wrong direction. Okay, I'll take those out. I'm just going to use my scissors to cut the threads in between. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you back round here, because I'm going to lay these back out just to make doubly sure I have got them in the right position, because there's nothing worse, as I say. So that one's going to go there, which is right. The centre square ones are easy. It doesn't matter if you sew the wrong side on the centre square ones, because at the end of the day, it's a square. It's these corner square triangles. So can you see I'm checking again that everything's in right. I'm not pressing at this stage. All I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this top one onto here. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to pop a pin in. I'm going to flip this one onto here, and I'm going to pop a pin in. And I don't know where I've lost the pin. And I'm going to flip that last one onto there, and I'm going to pop a pin in. So again, I've got my directions. I'm taking it back to the sewing machine. There's the pin I'd lost. I'm going to turn you around again. And we're going to take it back to the sewing machine. And this time, you know the directions again. We are just going to make sure that they're all squared up, beautifully squared up. Like that. Okay. And I always like to sew where there's no seams. So I have the seams on the bottom. And we're just going to pop that down. And again, we're going to chain piece. So that's going to give you your 3 rows. So 1, that's the 2 squares. I'm trying to put on top of my Apple Watch now, it doesn't work. So I'm using the Prim wrist pin cushion, which is really useful, particularly if you're moving around. You may have your ironing board in a slightly different place to your cutting table. So pop that onto there, and again, I'm just going to do it this way. Right, so we're going to pop that onto there like that. Great, which is all done. And then we'll just cut these again. So we'll cut the threads between those ones, and now we're at the pressing stage. So what we'll do is we will just grab the iron mat, and I'll just turn you back round again. Okay, and this time we've got both sides to press. So set the seam. And set the seam here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to press everything towards the square. So if you press towards the square, so just press and then press. So that's that one done. These are my 3 squares, so we will, actually they should go out because then that'll be the other way. Press, and then the last ones half square triangle row, and remember, just press. You're not ironing. Ironing's when you're doing this, so you don't want to do that. You're just going to press. And now we're going to lay it all back out again, because I want to make sure on this last thing that we get these right. So again, this time what we're going to do is we're going to flip this one onto here, and it's at this point we want the seams to go either side. So we want the seam to go to the left and the seam to go to the right. And I like, just for my comfort, to put a pin in there to make sure everything's right. I always put a pin at the end because I've got a long way to travel. And then we've got another seam here. Okay, so can you see? One seam goes one way, one seam goes the other. So it's just going to nestle lovely. And I'm going to pop a pin through the stitching. It'll come out on the other stitching. And then I'm going to take that to the sewing machine. And I'll just take you back to the sewing machine. And we're going to sew down this long length here, and again using the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now if you were making a quilt, oh yes, I've unthreaded that, very silly. If you were making a quilt, then what I would suggest you do is you do all of these in, it's a bit like a factory, so you could do all of your half square triangles and then do all of your rows together and then do your blocks. However, if I am making a quilt, I always do a complete block first, because that means that I get my positioning right and it's a good reference. So if you're making a large project, just make one quilt block, one complete block, have it to one side, and then you know that you can keep referring to it. This block is a lovely filler block, and it also would make a fabulous quilt as well. So that's the first row. Now I'm not gonna press it. I'm just gonna move you back around here. I'm not gonna press it at this stage. I'm just gonna pop those pins out. I'm gonna open it up because I always want to check. So can you see these are going lovely? Just check this is right here on the top, and we're going to flip this top row onto here like that. And again, we're going to nestle the seams. And we're going to pop a pin through there just to make sure it's in the right position. Pop a pin near the end, because that's just me, so it doesn't flap about. You're going to do all of your seams. You're going to pop a pin there. So again, can you see we've got one seam going that way, one seam going the other way. And by doing that, it means it's going to eliminate your bulk. And we're going to pop that there. Take it back to the sewing machine, so I'll just take you back there, and we're going to sew down this final row. How quickly does this block come together? So it's a nice simple block, and it gives that opportunity to practice and practice and practice those half square triangles. Bring that back around here like that. And there's your block. So all we're going to do now is you're going to press, set the seam first, and then we'll press that one. Okay, and set the seam of this one, and give that a press, and voila, there you are, beautiful shoe fly block. There you are. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.